And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. Guys, it's a big session because a lot of people, there is a lot of speculation, a lot of interest in trust and structuring and building that sort of portfolio in the way that you should be. And we wanted to debunk the reality because for me, this is not going to be your sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops kind of session. So if you want to tune into that session, tune into somebody else's show because we wanted to sort of bring the warts and all, the good, the bad, and the costly of trust. But we'll talk to many things. So, Alesha, how are you going?
Hey, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. Apparently, Joe says I put a nice shirt on today and did my hair. I did put a half decent shirt on and I didn't do my hair, so I'm not sure. Yeah, so it's good. Going well. And Joe, what's happening to you?
Mate, I'm well. I'm well. I think trusts are one of these things that people get confused about because there's a lot of stuff online. Like maybe 12 months ago, there was like nothing. There was very little online about trusts. Not nothing. And then maybe 24 months. Now everyone's like, oh my gosh, trust me. Yeah, it's good. It's real spicy. So I'm very good, mate. I'm very good. How are you? More importantly. You well?
Yeah, really. Which show do we go to now, Jeff? Okay, Gurav's already heckling me. It's like the Woolies share show. Gurav, Mac GM. That's an inside joke, so sorry about telling people. But no, I'm going well. Alesha asked me how I'm going. So no, it's going to be an amazing, fun session. The reason why, because it's important to have your accountant as a person in your corner when you're looking to build that portfolio to give you that advice and give you give you the information that you need to know to make an informed decision. Because doing it wrong is going to cost you money, particularly where you start to go into these structures and need to do deeds of variation and all that. And it may even cost you we'll talk about some of those things if you're not considering. So before we go any further, I do want to let people know, because Joe's told me to warn people at the start of the show, this information is general nature, not taking into account your personal needs or objectives. So go and speak to your professionals, including your accountant, your broker, and make sure you actually take accountability for these situations as well. So if somebody's telling you absolutely have to set this up, be very cautious of that person. It's ultimately up to you to make that call either way. But I just wanted to get that out of the way nice and early so anybody watching along can say, great, okay, now let's, as Joe says, get into the fun stuff. But Alesha, Alesha Masaud,
sorry, before we introduce Alesha, I think it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile mentioning, like, I just want to make it clear, it's not financial advice. I know you had the disclaimer up, but like the trust space is so complex and so confusing, and people are just jumping into it willy-nilly, and that's what we want to dive deep into on this session. But just don't go into it with your eyes closed. However, it gets pretty interesting if you do, like, okay, I've messed this disclaimer up, but look into it, go deep into it. That's what you're here for this session for. So I'm going to shut up. Who is Alesha, mate?
So Alesha, you are the partner and co-founder of TaxUp, which is an innovative accounting company focusing on investors and SMEs to simplify and strategize, but also get them to where they want to be in a way that's safe and compliant. You have dual degrees in accounting and law. You bring that powerful combination. So you think, I suppose, practically, but also from a very compliant perspective. You've worked at a couple of places. I've worked at Mac Bank, Macquarie Bank, Deloitte. I haven't worked there, and also BDO, which is a big five, or what are they, big six accounting firm these days?
Yeah, big five.
Okay.
They said they're big five. I think they're probably big 6, 7. So yeah.
Yeah. You've won this year the Small Business Leader for your work with TaxUp. And the thing I love about you is you have served as a board of director for the Plumtree Children's Services, which is not for profit. And you've been also, I saw you added in there, you've added a number of Australian Accounting Awards and been on Yahoo Finance. So, Alesha, is there anything you can't do?
Thank you so much. That was such a great introduction. Yeah, probably. I think juggling is pretty hard, but I'm trying it.
Excellent, yeah.
Got to juggle them trusts. Which one are you going to put it in?
Okay, so first off, before we get into that, I want to learn about the strategy from your accountant and what starts to qualify an accountant to be the one you want in your corner as part of your big team. So what key role does that accountant play in building out that property portfolio from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to have a property focused or an investment focused accountant on your side, just because they can help you understand the different types of structures that you can get into. Because if you have just a down the road accountant, they may not be across or they may not have the time to explain all the different structures that you may have to build well to minimize tax, to grow your leverage portfolio. So I think those are the key things and the differentiating factors in an accountant that you may want on your side, or you definitely want on your side for big property portfolio.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think this is where people get a little bit confused as well, because like how do you separate a investment savvy accountant versus your normal run of the mill? Typically what I see is people just going to, your H&R blocks, or you're just the normal one. Like you see this as soon as it comes around tax time, there's like some guy at a desk saying, I'll do your tax for $600. Like that's probably not your investment savvy investment savvy accountant. Like, but how do we find that? How do we find that right one?
I think it's primarily trying to have a conversation with them, right? And if they're sort of just referring to tax return or come to me when you're ready to get your tax return done, I think that's a really good clue for people to hone into and go, okay, probably they may not be able to support me with structuring or questions that I may have. Whereas someone that you may talk to when you're interviewing an accountant and ask them, hey, like, look, I want to, these are my hopes and dreams or plans. What can you do? And they'll tell you that they have worked with people like yourself before, or they've worked with people or they are currently working with people who are ahead in the journey, that you are. And that can give you confidence as to they have seen this play out multiple times. And they can support me much better than someone who just sort of says, yeah, don't listen to don't do too much research. I'll tell you exactly what to do. Like, probably stay away from those people who are not willing to have that robust discussion with you. I think like discussion and being able to talk through things is super important with your accountant.
Yeah. Are there any kind of questions that we can like uncover a good accountant versus a bad one? Like one of my favorite ones is like, what is like, what are your thoughts of property investing? And they're like, oh yeah, property investing is a great idea. I also do shares. I also do crypto. I also specialize in, offshore accounts. Like my accountant, for instance, I do property and business. That's all I do. And it's like, cool, great. You're gonna help me. But when you start to see them spreading themselves very thin across all of these other disciplines, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because I look at them and I go, they're all asset classes. I think of them and I say different people have different risk tolerances. And they may choose one asset class, or someone may choose all of those asset classes in their portfolio to grow. And from my perspective, because it's an asset class, it's easy in my mind to be able to, I guess, like differentiate between the two and advise on like what the tax consequences are for each of them and the structuring for each of them, for example. So I look at them as your asset classes, whereas like as a buyer's agent, I'd say, or even as a mortgage broker, Jack, you'd be able to say, I can look at asset classes as apartments, or now I'm like putting words in your mouth, but apartments or home loans versus like business loans and things like that. So yeah, I just look at like as asset classes.
Yeah.
Are there any?
I was just going to say that's an interesting point, because from a broking and even from a buyer's agent's perspective, like you specifically have like like owner occupied buyer's agents versus investment focused buyer's agents, and some try and do both. And I think as well, it would be hard as a I suppose an accountant to be a specialist in crypto tax and all these different types of taxes. But at the same time, it's not to say you can't do them, but it comes down to, it takes an extraordinary person to be able to do all of them. It's like, for example, somebody trying to do commercial plus home loan finance plus home plus development finance, it's going to be quite tough to get their head around that. And some of these questions, I wanted to get one of these questions up here from Gurav. Sorry, Joe. Is it generally the role of a financial advisor or an accountant advice about the appropriate structures? Or is it both, Alesha? What do you think about that one?
I think it could be both. I think it depends on each person's scenario, and there can be different scenarios for two different people. So, for example, one person, they come to me and they say, I want to invest in property. What do you think a really good structure is? And I can, walk them through the different types of structuring facets, right? That can be fairly easy. Whereas if someone says, hey, I want to invest in the share market, that's where I'd be like, yep, you definitely need to also speak to a financial advisor, and you need to get the right advice to be able to structure it. I can give structuring advice, but then if they say I want to purchase this share or that share, I probably won't touch that. Similarly with property, if someone says, where should I buy property? I don't touch that. I direct them to a buyer's agent and say, this falls out of my court. For structuring, you can, but yeah, if you want to get investment advice for property, go to a buyer's agent. For shares, ETFs, go to a financial advisor.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes a bit more sense. So there's a bit of, so they can be like, this person's jumped on here saying both are able to give you that kind of advice, but still vet the competency of the individual, which is definitely a key. What kind of made you go into property investing, like accounting for property investors? I know you obviously do a lot of other accounting, but like what makes you like property?
Because I own real property, so for me, it's really close to my heart. I invest in, like I said, I invest in different types of asset classes myself, which is maybe why it for me, I look at them as asset classes. But property for me is, I think, that Australian dream that I'm kind of like always like looking at realestate.com and also checking different things. So yeah, I think that's why it's close to my heart, closer than the other asset classes.
Yeah. I wanted to, because I think this is keep throwing the questions. I love how people are thinking about this, because it shows that we have a really switch on audience here. Most weeks, every week we have switched on, but particularly for tonight, I think, because we've generated a lot of interest. So we'll talk about some of that trust and what you should do at the start, or what you should consider rather than what you should do, because I wanted to bring this up and say, are mortgage brokers the right people to help with trust advice? And this is a very spicy question, because you see a lot of content out there these days, and it makes me a little bit concerned, because I just sort of see that even on our group, in one of the questions, you sort of saw that self-declared, and we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think that's an absolute it's a ticking time bomb to some extent for some people. But I love Michael's answer, who says, I would think mortgage brokers are the right people to help with trust advice relating to borrowing, and accountants are the right people to help with trust advice relating to tax and income distribution, etc. What I would say around that, though, Michael, I would add a little bit more color, and I'm interested in both your views on this, because I think this is a very spicy one. It can be a little bit, I would say that you need to be, I suppose, right people to help. It's not so much help about, it's you need to be the one who decides what your goals are, and you get presented with the options, and then figure out the pros and the cons of individual name versus the versus the trust, because both will have there's no sort of perfect silver bullet out there. Those are my thoughts. So if somebody's telling you absolutely this has to be next one the trust or next one's personal name, I'd say, well, let's take a step back. What do I want as an investor, as a borrower, et cetera, et cetera? Go on, Joe, or go Alesha first. Sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think a lot of people just come in and want an answer on a silver plate, and it's really hard to do that, because unless you go out there and you do your own research, you understand the complexities, and then come back with really like thoughtful questions that will help you get further than sort of like coming in to meetings without having any idea, or like even if the first time you come in you don't have any idea, like an accountant or mortgage broker or buyer's agent gives you different options, you go home, you think about them, and then coming back with some thoughtful questions. And those people I've seen in my practice, they go much further than those who sort of go, just tell me the answer. And I'm kind of go, like you said, I can't really, because you have to make this decision for yourself. You have to make the right decision for your circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like it does come down to you are, and hats off to everyone that's on this podcast. You know, it's a fun title, using trust for property, the good, the bad. But man, that's boring. Like you're literally taking up your Wednesday night to listen about trusts and property investing. Like hats off to you for taking that initiative to learn about this. You are the type of people that are going to succeed, because you're actually taking the effort to dive in deeper. So my view on this is you guys are the conductor of your, property symphony, and you've got experts and you rely on those experts. I literally did this today for myself. We're building a portfolio in public. We got 5 properties. We're doing the development right now. The broker said X and the accountant said Y. We need to, set this up. And then the builder's like, what the hell are you doing? I've never seen this done this way before. Well, no, because you deal with a lot of, different people. So you've got to take the advice from one person and then give it to another, and just pick up the phone, I think is the most powerful thing. Hey, accountant, I was just chatting with my mortgage broker, and he said that, you and I were talking about trust, and he said that to get the trust positive, that's when it starts to help with the borrowing capacity. Like, how do I need to think about that from a tax perspective? And I don't get any capital gains, negative gearing benefits if I've got my trust. What the heck? I didn't know that. And does that affect the accounting side of things? So just bounce everything off your inner circle. I don't see that enough. I don't see enough people asking questions of their inner circle, their brokers, their accountants, their buyers agents, because in this room right here that we're in, Jeff, the broker, Joe, the buyer's agent, Alesha, the accountant, we actually, all 3 of us have 3 different areas that we're pulling from. Like, I want to get the most amount of capital growth. Jeff wants to get the most amount of borrowing capacity. And sometimes that means, and Alesha wants to save the most amount of tax and structure it correctly so that you're protected, and also minimize tax as much as you can. But, Jeff, from a broking standpoint, is going to want a 6% yield. But Joe is going to want to focus on the capital growth, which is only going to say, look, the best capital growth is not at 6% anymore. So I know Jeff wants the thing to be cash flow positive. However, in X amount of period, you can start to, buy a good asset and eventually turn it into something of value. Don't know if that answers your question, Jeff. I feel like maybe not.
Bit of word salad, but you did your best, Joe. It's okay, man. So on, well done, Joe. So on that, Alesha, what I wanted to know, and I need to look at those, bring those slides in. A successful property strategy. I think should we start to bring that up, and sort of, because I think this will be very powerful, and we can talk to it, property and trust. Which slide is this? The first slide, Joe?
This is well, the first one's just this, but yes.
So
what is
Joe.
Actually, before we get all like technical and stuff, can you just explain to us, Alesha, what is a trust, and why you typically see property investors use them? Like, what is why do they do it? So what is it? Why do they do it?
Yeah, for sure. And to be able to do that, I think it's really important to go back slightly, take a step back, and like truly understand what a trust is. So like the trusts were developed when people left for crusades. So I know we hear a lot about trusts, but we don't actually understand what they are. And I think if people do that, it will help them like get a good sense of why we have them. So people left for crusades back in the day, and then they would leave their property and their like stuff for their family and friends to look after. And that's how the concept of trust came about. So essentially what happens in a trust is it's a legal relationship where one person like holds the property or assets for another person. I'm calling it assets because you can hold whatever you want, but property specifically in this podcast, right? For the benefit of someone else. So you've got this little triangle going. And the reason why they are used so commonly now, because they're a fantastic structure for tax minimization, almost creating a separate legal entity, not really, or let's just call it a separate entity, because it's not fully that. And they're great for things like asset protection, family wealth planning, tax planning, even superannuation. That's a trust. and for holding investment assets. So that's like, and to be able to use it in property isn't a new thing. It's just a new thing for people because it's been commercialized on YouTube or on podcasts these days.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So to kind of dive in, that's what this is, illustration of, breaking down a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think this primarily helps support or helps people understand what the different elements of a trust actually are. So,
Yep.
for example, like when you're setting up a trust, you need to have a few different elements before it becomes like a proper, I guess, trust. I'm going to just zoom in my screen properly here. So you need a settler, and the settler is the person who settles, I guess, the trust, and the trustee is the person who runs the trust. Essentially, they are the ones who control the trust assets. They control where the income of the trust goes.
Yep.
And then one of the key people in the trust is also an appointer. An appointer is the person who can kick out the trustee or keep the trustee. And people forget about the appointer when they're having these conversations. So if your relationship with the trustee goes sour, then you need to have the power. You need to make sure you know who the appointer of the trustee is to be able to tap on their shoulder and go, hey, can you remove the trustee? Can you update the trustee?
Who has that? Who typically has that power? Like, who is usually assigned that appointer? Who's usually the settler? Yeah.
So settler is the person who writes the trust for you. So
Okay.
Depending on who you go to, they will end up being the settler of your trust. And it doesn't really matter in the sense, like on the deed, it doesn't matter who your settler is, because once they've settled the trust, your trust can start functioning and it can go off forward. But usually it's an accountant in most scenarios. And then the appointer of the trustee is the person who is wanting to set up the trust. So, for example, if a husband and wife come to my office and they say, I want to set up a family trust, we specifically ask them, who do you want to be named the appointer of the trustee?
Mm. Okay.
And they
Great.
we usually just pick one person. And most of the time, it's the husband will put their hand up and he'll say, can I be the appointer? And the wife normally doesn't have an issue with it. So I'm just like giving you generally what happens, but it doesn't always have to be the husband. It can also be the wife. Like there have been cases of it. The wife's the appointer.
Sorry, Alesha. I was just
now
laughing.
I'm just going into like this gender tunnel that I need to backpedal out of.
Yeah. I'm just laughing at what Gurav said. Is Jeff or Joe the appointer in the Oz property investors portfolio? You'll have to ask us after a few beverages, Gurav. I know you don't drink, but no. What I was going to say, yeah, I think that's a great illustration of that's probably one of the best ways I've ever seen. I've not ever seen anybody ever explain the way the trust is actually set up, because you read these 30 to 40 page, 50 page documents, but not actually appreciating what is contained within them, because it's almost to me like double Dutch a loan document. I'm like, I read it and I take it in and I look for key terms. But so what are those things within the trust deed that are really important that people need to be factoring in when they're getting set up? And that's a big question, I know, but
big question.
For me, from my perspective, it would definitely be who the trustee is, who the appointer is, and who the beneficiaries can be, or if it can be like a broad set of beneficiaries. So every time we set up the trust for our clients, we'll talk to them about if they want a corporate trustee or an individual trustee. And usually a corporate trustee provides better asset protection compared to an individual trustee. And the reason for that is because if we think about corporate structures, and this may be a bit boring, so sorry about that. But
very interesting, important.
Okay, so yes, it's important. It's very important to know. So a company is considered a separate legal entity in the court of law. So in our legal system, a company is a separate legal entity, and therefore it acts as a separate person. So if you sue a company, you are just suing the company by itself, rather than suing the person who's running the company. And in some instances, you can sue the person as well, but that's very niche circumstances. So when you have a trustee, that's a person. And because that person is now controlling the trust, which is why in the picture that I made, I had like this black line around the trustee to show the dominance, or to show the control of the trust that the trustee has over the trust, right? So if you've got a corporate trustee, that's a company that's operating the trust, that's controlling the trust, versus an individual. So when an individual, on the other hand, is operating the trust or controlling the trust, that's where your individual liability comes into play. So someone gets unhappy in the trust, or the beneficiaries get unhappy about how the trustee is distributing income, how they're managing the assets, they will sue the person directly. So, which is why,
so they will sue the trustee.
yes, exactly right.
Yeah,
Which is
because
why
the trustee is at the trustee is at the top, and the point of the trustee is to act in the benefit of the beneficiaries. The entire reason the trust is set up is they're at the top there, acting in the best interest of the three people at the bottom, which will be husband, wife, and kid. And if they start doing some tricky stuff, you can get sued, and you're going to get in trouble potentially.
Well, hopefully they'll just remove you as trustee if they don't like you, right? If they've got the power. And if they don't have the power, yeah, if the beneficiary doesn't have the power, they'll remove you, or they'll sue you. But if they have the power to remove you as the appointer, then they'll do that.
So that's kind of one of those key points in the trust that Jeff's talking about. Why it's important to kind of have in that trust is what are each one of these roles and why they're important. And I guess there's so many variables for why each person is so different, in like why have each person in each different role. Yeah, interesting. So when you see property investors, like how does this relate to property? Like what has a trust got to do with property investing?
It's got everything to do with property investing from the days that the concept of trust started, right? When the Crusaders left for war, they left their homes in the power of the trustees. So therefore, it's got everything to do with property. Because back then you didn't have crypto, you didn't have ETFs, you didn't have shares. You probably had commodities, like you had gold and silver, right? But and people were trading those. So it has got everything to do with property in the way I look at it, because that's how it was born. And in today's modern world, the way we apply it, you can hold assets in a trust, and one of them being property. And banks like the corporate trustees a lot more in my dealings or in my work, because of the protection that it has compared to the individual that I was talking about. And therefore, they're happy to lend to trusts that are with corporate trustees versus, or less likely, I should say, with individual trustees.
Yeah. And Sebastian,
why is that? Sorry. Why don't they? Because one of the things I hear is, a trust has to go. You pour money into a trust, it has to come out at the end of the day. Whereas people create a corporate trustee to capture that wealth. Can you talk to that a little bit, to kind of like that just then adds a little bit more layer to the corporate trustee structure rather than just having the trust standalone?
You're talking bucket company, Joe? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, the corporate trustee. Like trust, you have to run all of the profits through, and you can't capture any money in them, right? You can't store wealth in there. So that's why people get the corporate trustee, because that money is then poured into the top. It's then distributed out to the beneficiaries, which is then the company. Oh, I'm talking bucket company, aren't I?
You're talking bucket company.
I get concerned when Joe's like,
you're on the right track. And then you sort of like deviate.
That's why I was like, that's effectively, Joe, the key difference is who owns the assets, effectively. My understanding, Alesha.
Okay, sorry.
Oh,
We
you
were
got
we were not
I
going to
think
talk
the
about.
thing
We
is,
said we're not
Yeah,
going to talk about bucket companies until the
well, I'm not
very
saying
end.
we
And
won't. There is a question about it, so we'll get to it at some stage. You have to stay tuned to the end. So stay tuned, because that is an interesting sort of thing. Sebastian has asked the question: if a trustee is a person rather than a corporate entity, you won't be able to exclude it. And I don't like to say the word exclude. I say put to one side is what I like to say. It wants the trading neutral, retain borrowing capacity, right? And from a yes, and that's where, if it's my understanding, Alesha, from at least from an accounting perspective, is an individual trustee. It's going to be hard to get a loan anyway, as well. Like, banks really don't like them for whatever reason. They don't. I don't actually know if anybody, unless somebody at the bank, the policy. There is a very good reason, I'm sure, for it, but effectively, yeah, I imagine there'd be a reason. If you know, I actually don't. I just know that it is harder to get lending an individual trustee.
my educated guess would be that because an individual, as a trustee, again, controls the asset, and
Yeah.
therefore you can't exclude them, especially if they've got, like, they're purchasing the asset, they're
Oh, yeah.
the trustee, they're also the beneficiary. Then, like, how can you exclude them when
Yeah.
you've got a corporate entity? Then you can potentially think about excluding them from the lending scenario, because they're a separate legal entity. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I was thinking more about why banks don't like individual trustees versus corporate, but I think that's a question. I'm sure that I like to know the answer to questions, but no, I'm not saying that's a question I want to know for my own thing. I mean, there would be a reason, and I have to think through it logically. But no, Sebastian, yes, I agree. If it's an individual trustee, assuming you get the loan for it, which banks don't like them anyway, it's already effectively, you are the person in that name anyway as well. So as Alesha said. So well done. A thing I wanted to touch on before we started to talk about the first sort of moves an investor should make, and the considerations about their structuring and strategy around from a tax perspective. This one's an interesting one, because can you put your own PPR into a trust? And the answer is, well, probably yes. But why? What are the reasons for and against that, Alesha? From your
Do you want to pay CGT when you sell your PPOR? I'd imagine no. So Australia has one of the really good tax systems where we don't actually tax the house that we live in. But when I say house, it can be an apartment, or the residence that we live in, and if we own it, we don't tax it as a system. But as soon as you put it in a different structure, think of it as a different entity, then it's not on your personal name. So even if you live in it, you can't claim main resident exemption, which allows for stopping you paying tax. So
which is
probably
massive, right? Like, that's massive.
huge.
Like, if you buy a property and then 10 years later it doubles, you make $500,000, you then have to pay tax on that $500,000, or you get it tax free with a PPOR. So this is why people don't have their PPOR in trusts, in structures potentially.
Not in structures like that. I actually got someone come to us recently. She said she is living in a property that she bought in a trust and hadn't realized that she would have to pay. Yeah. So she sort of said someone gave her this advice like 20 years ago or something. And then she started living in it, created like short stays kind of accommodation, like a bed and breakfast, moved into Airbnb when that came around. And then now she was planning on selling it and realized that there's a CGT consequence. So that was a bit steep for her to understand.
That's massive. Well, I mean, like, if I think about it, you're a property investor, and then you move out of your PPOR, and then you're like, well, actually, I'd love to live in Victoria. I own property in Victoria. The lease has just run out. I'll just move in there. And then you claim it as your capital, your principal place of residence. You just keep going on with your merry way, thinking you're going to, it goes from 500 to $1 million. Oh, that would suck. Because you bought it in a trust, right? You didn't think about the consequences of doing that. You treat it as an investment, but as it's in the trust, you don't get that benefit. Shit. Don't want to be doing that.
No.
I don't. I don't.
So a lot of people asking about the numbers and the accountant's letter. So we will talk to our people. I'm not ignoring these. I mean, everybody's asking it. So because I think it's important to build the foundations first, because if everybody wants the location, everyone wants the free boom location. So, but I'd like to say, if you don't actually understand whether those boom locations are relevant for you or the right question to ask your accountant and broker to help you make the decisions, I think you're going to potentially come a cropper. So, Alesha, let's get into if I've got one or two properties or just starting my journey, how should I be thinking about, at least from I suppose an accounting perspective or a tax? What are the things you talk to first time investors or a couple in? What are the things they should be thinking about?
Are you talking specifically from a tax perspective?
Yeah, like if somebody comes to you and says, "Okay, Alesha, I want to build a portfolio. Tell me all the things I need to know from a tax perspective," because they've had the conversation with a broker, fantastic, and then they come to you, and a broker's given them, say, "Okay, you've got $800K, $1 million worth of borrowing capacity." They come to you and they say, "Okay, great, that's good to know. What are the things I should be thinking about, Alesha?"
Yeah, that's a great question. I think most of the times a broker will also advise them, or not advise, I should say. They'll mention different types of structures, and then they'll sort of say, "Hey, like, have a chat with an accountant." Like, this is what a good broker would do, right? And some of the times they'll come with an idea as to whether they should buy in a trust, what the benefits are, especially if they've got two investment properties in their personal name or one or two investment properties in their personal name. They'll now start thinking about, okay, now I'm ready to build a portfolio. Some of the things that they want to know about, or a lot of the times people don't understand trusts, so they haven't really come across them before, especially at that stage. So asset protection is a big one, which can be, I think, a nuance at times, but it may not be as impactful for some versus others. And these are some of the things that we like. All of these things we'll run through these for everyone, but everyone will give them their own value based on their circumstances because of their own risk profile. So, for example, the reason why I talk about asset protection in that way is if someone says, "My job is like so." I have no risk in my job. Like, I am not getting sued. Like, what are you talking about? So therefore, for them, asset protection isn't really like at the top of their radar. But however, you may want to consider things like leveraging. Leverage, as soon as you are leveraging an asset, like getting a loan on an asset, that is a level of risk that you're taking, right? And sometimes because people forget that property, that you're getting a loan on a property, it is still a leverage, right? So they forget about that. And so sometimes it's important to remind people that that is still a risk. Like getting a loan is a risk, kind of, which is a manageable risk, which is why asset protection does come into play when it comes to purchasing a property. What trusts also allow for are things like tax planning flexibility, because as I was talking about before, you can like choose the amount of beneficiaries, and you can choose whoever you want to like allocate your income to. And things like succession planning and estate planning, if you want to like transfer assets to your next generation, it's easy to do it through a discretionary trust rather than if someone passes away and then they go through a will and a testamentary trust. Not saying that's the wrong, like that is also a really good way of it happening, but it's easier to do that. Sorry, going back to asset protection. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say. So what you're saying is I make $100,000 of income throughout the year because I've done my portfolio, I've built it, but I have to pay tax on $100,000 of that income. However, my wife, myself, and my child are beneficiaries, so I can then take that $100,000 and then distribute it in the most tax effective way. Because the wife, she's not at work, she's not got a job because she's looking after the baby, hardest job in the world. The baby, well, not the baby actually, because they're under 18, so it's probably useless. But that kid's grown up now. He's 19. I don't know the rules, and then
Four
myself.
400, yeah. You get $400 odd dollar threshold, Joe, around that.
$400.
Yeah, which is going to cost you more for an accountant to actually
More in admin
distribute it versus more in admin than
wait until they're 18. So if like for me, for instance, right, I'm married with a baby, so she's not going to, the little baby is not going to benefit me in any way until 18 years financially. Very big cost. Yeah. But then it just allows you to distribute to your partner, yourself, and anybody else that is on there, which then has massive tax consequences because I'm on the highest tax threshold. You give me $100,000, I'm going to be paying 45% or whatever the marginal tax rate is. Distribute that out to two people. It then is halved, goes to the person, then allows you to save a lot more money on potentially. I don't know what words I should be using now. Jeff is getting up. Jeff is looking at me like I'm saying things.
Let the guest tell us, Joe, about the benefits.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to break down that distribution thing a little bit more because I think it's important. But what other benefits? What else we got?
No, definitely, like 100%. You're on the money there. The only thing that we need to be careful of there is Section 100A, which sort of talks about avoiding tax. So we don't want to do it in a way that we are avoiding tax. It's more about, finding the right structure and the right distribution for a person's scenario and a family scenario. And therefore, you do it for the benefit of the family instead of like in a tax avoidance kind of manner. And you're absolutely right. It would be a child can't, like, it's not worth distributing to another 18-year-old just because of the admin it would cost and the low value that it is. I remember back in the day, the trusts, you could actually distribute to children, then obviously a lot of people started doing it. So the tax man was like, rightio, let's stop this from going on. But yeah, so 100A it's a complex area. You have to be careful about it. But yes, 100%. You can distribute to reasonable family members and potentially bucket companies, but it doesn't actually work for property, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Sorry, quickly wanted to go back to the asset protection point where if someone does have a business or someone has like a litigious job like a surgeon or like someone who's in the media, someone who's got a massive following and things like that, that's where asset protection is like 1,000 times super helpful. Like I'm just saying a vague figure, 1,000, it's not actually a real figure, by the way. Just for people to...
I love that an accountant has to justify that you're saying, well, it's actually not 1,000%. It's probably more like 564%. But
clarify that.
I don't think anyone was taking you literally there, but good to know.
I have this like silly habit of exaggerating, so I can exaggerate numbers at times like that. So and then I realize I have to catch myself. But so separation of assets is super important, and that's what the asset protection also covers, where you can separate like a few different assets into different trusts. And I think that also supports the lending policy side of things, Jeff.
Yeah, you'd have to run me through what we. I'm sorry, I'm focusing on the question as well. What was the context of where we were sort of talking about the trust and distribution?
Sorry, so I went back quickly to the asset protection side of things, right? Yep. And then the separation of assets. And the separation of assets is also like a key element in the mortgage broking side, which can support people in being able to grow further.
Yeah, it's look, I'd say, and that's what I really wanted to unpack, because, and I suppose what I would love to hear more about is, I feel like we're only saying that these are good things, and I think the thing that the little spoken thing about is the risks or the challenges involved in trusts and setting those up. Because for me, the thing that some people often forget is that there's no negative gearing, which I know I feel like people know about it, but the more conversation I have with investors, and you do probably as well, Joe, is it is quite taxing, pun intended, because you don't. It's more taxing in your personal name. So that's where you really need to factor that in and make that decision before you go down that path. Because once you go down there, you then have the ongoing maintenance costs. You have land tax issues. You have so many sort of potential potholes in your
Set up
investing
costs,
journey.
counting
Sorry, Jack?
fees.
Yeah, exactly. So
Accounting
I'm
fees,
just
setup
thinking,
costs.
like, is a trust really worth it in the end? Like, if I
Well,
want to build a portfolio quickly,
maybe you can answer this, Jeff. Why do people get trust? Like, what is this whole thing? Like, social media has been blowing up about it. It's doing it. Like, what is the big thing and the big sales pitch that people have about trust? Why are they doing it?
Well, at least from a lending perspective, I'll talk about it from that, because where you may be able to exclude that, provided you work hand in hand with your accountant. And we'll talk about those accountants' letters, Alesha, because I think that's very important for people to understand the criteria that people need to meet before even going down that path. Because if you don't understand that and you just think, oh yeah, an accountant, every Harry,
Why do they do it?
Why do they do
Why
it?
do they do it?
Because to extend or preserve that borrowing capacity, or the perception of the so that you can do so. And Alesha, I'm sure you see this as much as I do, but for me, the thing that people don't consider, and I see this somewhat regularly, you probably do as well, Joe, is once you get beyond that first trust, you need sort of those deposits coming from somewhere. So, and if you don't have those deposits, which is going to require borrowing capacity from somewhere, if you don't have that, then I think you're shooting yourself in the foot somewhat. So you need to manage your own expectations. So to effectively do that, you either need time or you need really good income, I suppose. Time, really good income, or a more active property investing strategy. That's the way I think about it, Joe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. So just to summarize what you've said there, and really what I'm going to summarize is the hype that you're seeing, and the main reason why everyone talks about trust is because there may be an ability to an individual can buy 1, 2, 3, 4 investment properties, and then they can't borrow any more money, right? Like, this is the sales pitch for why it's all over social media right now. They can't borrow any more money. So what they do before they buy that fourth one and tap out their borrowing ability, let's say they have 600,000 borrowing ability, they then set up a trust, and then they get a property and place that property in a trust. Then they do a granny flat, or they buy a high yielding asset. That trust then goes positive, and then that is excluded from the bank's consideration. Yes, you own 3 properties, but your trust own ones. This one's cash flow positive, which with an accountant letter, like we'll talk about later on, you'll be able to exclude that from your borrowing ability, forever leaving you with just 3 assets with a $600,000 borrowing capacity in theory.
Can I just pull you up there, Joe?
Okay,
forever?
please.
Not forever. It's only for
Not
the
forever.
time that accountant's letter, and banks will only consider that for 3 months roughly. Beyond that 3 month, you start to then the banks start to ask questions.
Oh man,
well,
banks bloody do it all the bloody time. Oh, can I get another accountant's letter? Can I get another? I'm like, dude, I sent you one last month. Not much has changed.
No,
But
but
also
things
Does
can.
my head in.
What if it has changed though, Joe?
Well, it's true. What if it has? You're going to do bloody Alesha's head in it. She's the one having to write them. But I guess that's the sales pitch of why everyone loves them. So I just wanted to get to that point, because I feel like we've chatted for 40 minutes about how they are structured, and it's just like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Because you guys are very smart. I'm just playing dumb here. But that is why people are doing it. But maybe it's not the best way forward for you, but this is how people continue. This is how people get from, continue, like, this guy's got 15 properties. How the hell did he get 15 properties? I don't understand.
Because he has a higher damn income, Joe. That's why.
Or the portfolio in the trusts are positive or structured in a way. Okay. Glad I got that out. Sorry, just need to get that out.
Are you okay? Are you okay, Joe?
Hope that makes sense.
Those investors, and I'm sure you see this, Alesha, I want to ask you about this for you, because I'm sure you have the investors who've built that $5 million property portfolio that are on the average incomes of 150 to 200K. It's because it's taken them 10 to 15 to 20 years to get there. So, and yes, they've used trust, but they've done it very slowly. So I've been a little like, that's where the hype, I'm deflating the hype. Unfortunately, it does take time, and it takes income, and it takes borrowing capacity. It's not a silver bullet. What are your thoughts on it, Alesha, from an accountant's perspective?
I love that. 100% agree, because we do taxes for people. So we get to see, the good, bad, and the ugly, right? And you're absolutely right. Property is not an overnight pill, and sometimes it can be purported to be. It does take time, and you need to. I think another important thing is to invest in the right asset, and a lot of people forget that. You have to invest in an asset that is going to grow in the structure that's right to be able to get you the lending that you want to be able to get. So I think these three things need to work in harmony for people to get to those like $5 million portfolios, multiple property portfolios, right? Or like double-digit property portfolios. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because you've got all properties that are negatively geared. You've got no money in the bank. You can't pay for your repayments. It doesn't happen like that. You need to have cash to be able to either have the property as positively geared, or wait for the property to get positively geared. And usually it takes like 5 to 10 years for a property to become positively geared after you've held it for so long, unless you've got a really, really good rental yield. But then you, like Joe, you were saying, it's going to impact on your capital growth, right? So there are like lots of different things in the mix that people need to like think about and focus on, and having the right team behind them can definitely support them. And one of the things, for example, that's a pitfall for people is that they need to make sure things like your trust minutes, if you are purchasing properties in trust, they are done before the 30th of June. Because if they're not done before 30th of June, like the trust can't hold income, like you were saying, Joe, like a company can. It can keep the income over 1 financial year or 2 financial years. Trust can't. It has to distribute it. And if you don't distribute it before 30th of June every financial year, it's going to end up costing you 47 cents to the dollar, which is like the steepest tax you'll pay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded way of saying that it's not an easy road.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. So you said long-term trusts have worked very well for us, but at the start they are a challenge. So look, and I think that, look, there are ways, if you have significant amounts of income left over, you need to talk to your accountant about, because Alesha, if we talk to the accountant's letter, what are the sort of key things an accountant should be? I'm not getting you to tell accountants how to do their jobs, but what are the things that you consider as an accountant when you're considering the self-sufficiency of a trust, like how that's meeting itself? Like, for you to be comfortable, what sort of discussions do you have with the client?
Yeah, for sure. So I think some people have this understanding that they can just walk in and be like, okay, can you write this letter for me? And that's really difficult. That's really, really hard, because from an accountant's perspective, I don't understand your numbers. I don't understand how your trust is doing. I haven't done a tax return for it. I haven't done any financials for it. So I don't have any background on it. So that's, I think that's why it's hard to sort of straight off the cuff be like, yep, cool, I can like sign off on this hand on heart. So one of the elements that are really important is that the trust needs to be self-sufficient. That means that it can look after itself effectively. It can look after for its expenses adequately. And you can have lots of different ways of doing that. And people can, if they can wait for a property to become positively geared, they can, put extra money into the trust, and that's the trust just keeps that money in itself, and they don't touch that money. Or they can buy other forms of assets in that trust that are income producing.
So what can someone have 3 trusts? They put $500,000 in trust 1, get an accountant letter for that, then transfer that $500,000 to trust 2, get an accountant letter, and then transfer that 500 and get number 3. Is that?
Oh, you didn't read the pre-chat, Joe.
No, so
that's a big no-no.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a breaking the rules.
No, not at all. No, because the thing is, then how is the trust self-sufficient? You can't. It's not self-sufficient. I think that almost answers the question directly, right? Like if you are moving money around, then you don't have enough of a buffer to keep the loan, to keep the lending, to stay afloat, and that goes to show that you are just tricking the system on a highly leveraged asset, which is going to bite you if, for example, you have to change the hot water system, you have to change like the roof to fix the roofing, or something happens.
You lose your job. You no longer have income coming in. Your business profit halves by 50%. Like how are you continuing to then sort of pay for those expenses? So I think Joe was asking that question a little bit cheekily, were you, Joe? Probably.
No, well, it's just like I'm just trying to unlock the questions that the people are thinking in their minds, like, how do I hack the system? And it's like, well, yeah, don't, because that's not the right way to kind of balance it. There's a great question that's come up here though, because we're talking about great. The amazing thing about having a trust is when it's positive. Okay, well, so what if the property? So the question is, what if the property is not under the trust is not positively geared? Is that an issue to move forward?
What do you think about that, Alesha?
So I think, like I was saying, so
it's negatively geared, right?
Yeah. So if it is negatively geared, there are ways around that. So you can have a set of money, you can save up some money, put it in that trust, and then you don't touch it. And then therefore, for a period of time, an extended period of time, that trust is going to be self-sufficient. And then you can move forward. It's kind of like saving a deposit for the trust to be positively geared.
Huh. Yeah. Oh, that's a really cool idea. That's a really cool way to think about it. Like, how much deposit do I need? How much, like, what LVR does this property need to be? Well, how much deposit do I need to put into this property to get it cash flow positive, which then allows me to do it? That's like a goal to work towards, which kind of feels cool.
And it's kind of like buying another property in your individual name. This is why, for me, when people get so excited about trusts, I mean, yes, they can be powerful, but you still need the deposit from somewhere. And if you don't have that, or if there's nothing you're willing to change in your individual circumstances, as in if you've got 4 properties and you're not willing to sell and extract some of that. And yes, but one thing that really hit home to me, and I've started to do this even more, every time I make a move, have that conversation with your accountant, because after you've moved money somewhere, it's kind of too late. Like the horse has already bolted. And because I've had many conversations with my accountant after I've done something, and now just like, if I need to do something, I just pick up the phone 5-10 minutes or an email, say, if we do this, what are the tax implications? Because you shouldn't, because there is that sort of, and that's the bigger responsibility with growing that portfolio as well.
So how would you answer this one, Jeff? So if people,
yes, it is a big issue moving forward. Well, not a big issue, but it is an issue. Because then the way the lender then looks at that is, if you don't
still counting that number 4, this number 4 has not disappeared. It's there. You don't have $600,000 worth of borrowing capacity. You just have a bigger expense from a trust setup.
That's also not negatively geared, because you can't claim that. So then you've actually shot yourself in the foot. So that's why people are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go in the trust and it's going to solve all my thing. Well, it's like, no, you need to have that conversation with the accountant and then figure out, and then you make that call, not somebody telling you. But so it is an issue. And then you just need to kind of think about, well, do I unwind that or do I wait? Like, how do I sort of, there's usually a solution to the problem. It just will either come with a cost, and that cost will either be money or time.
Yeah, absolutely right.
It's also like, the other thing to note as well is like land tax is a thing that exists, and in trust it's completely different. I used to think that Victoria was the worst for land tax, but it depends on the entity, right? Like if you buy a property for 600,000, you pay land tax if you have a discretionary trust in New South Wales for $100 plus 1.6%, which is $5,700. So you've just got to be careful about what you do, like the type of trust and the type of entity and the state that you're buying. Whereas Victoria has 2,576 for that same thing. So again, a conversation with your accountant around, okay, cool, I'm setting up a trust. I want to buy a property. Where am I? Like, I'm buying it in this state. No, don't do that because of this, this, and this. Or consider this, this, and this. It does come into play a little bit. Whereas that same property in the personal name doesn't hit the land tax threshold. 0% zero, like zero land tax instead of 5,000. That's a massive. That's $100 and how much? $107 a week, I think it is. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Should we throw that first sponsor, Joe? Because we're already at the hour
110.
mark. Time is flying.
Jesus. Okay. Well, what are we going to talk to next?
There's so many questions, but I think the traps people fall into in their tax sort of scenarios, I think, whether that be trust or individual name, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Alesha.
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For OzProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to policeyproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. So, Joe, we're only got 2 months till the end of roughly 2 months, because I almost consider. Here we go. Oh, sorry, Alesha's back. Sorry. You're doing amazing, by the way, in terms of you've had your echinacea, so good on you for I wouldn't have been sorry to mention that.
Battling through the podcast in a sickness, so thank you for doing that in your coffee.
Gurav, I'll get to Gurav's question as well, but I wanted to know, what are those big mistakes, personal name or trust, that people are making? Is it sort of going to the accountant and expecting them to work magic, whether that be in the personal name, in terms of, what are those big mistakes you're seeing at the moment that people need to be addressing or considering at least?
I think some of the big mistakes are probably some things like not running the numbers beforehand. Like if you run the numbers, you can then figure out if your land tax surcharges are worth paying. If, for example, the loss of negative gearing in a discretionary trust is worth it. And is it worth like the cost of setting up the trust structure? And the stamp duty trap that occurs if you first buy in your personal name and then your broker tells you that, look,
so bad.
You cannot actually borrow anymore. You'll have to do something. You'll have to move this property into a trust, for example. You'd have to pay stamp duty again. So the biggest mistake is probably forward planning. And in that, you can when you buy a business, when people buy a business, they run proper due diligence over it. They don't just look at TikTok and go, so this person was saying that this area is hot on the market at the moment, so I'm going to dive deep into it. They run proper numbers, they understand it, they use professionals to help guide them through their journey, and credible professionals who are, looking at investments day in and day out from their area, like a buyer's agent would, a mortgage broker would, and an accountant would. So I think having the right advice at the start sets apart my investor clients who are building year on year versus, or not, I shouldn't say building it, I should say growing year on year, growing their portfolio year on year, versus those who end up in a poor position, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'd actually agree, and it's even a mindset, a way of thinking. It's like, because I remember when I don't know about you, Joe, but when I first started investing, I thought that I knew so many things, and I still to some extent think that, but I also realize there's so many things that I don't know that I need to kind of have that conversation, and through those conversations, you actually realize, oh wow, maybe Joe, you realize it from day one, and maybe just a quicker learner than me, but I thought, yeah, I'm the bee's knees. I know everything about investing, and I realized, crap, I got woken up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is let someone be in their lane and be the expert at that, and but you have to ask the questions. And now everyone's like, oh, you have the internet, you've got no excuse. And it's kind of like, yeah, but what question do I Google to find the answer to have that conversation with Alesha? Now we chat GPT. Now with ChatGPT, though, you don't have an excuse. Literally, I am chatting with my accountant today, and I am building a portfolio. This is what I have right now. This is what I'm trying to do. What are some of the considerations that I need to have an intellectual conversation with my accountant? Well, the considerations, the three things you should think about is this, 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 and this. And it's like, oh, shit, yeah. And then you have a chat with Alesha, and she's like, well, you also need to consider number 4. Number 1's not a big consideration, but it's like, again, being that whole orchestra leader. But yeah, I think that was actually, I think that's probably the big lesson that I've learned from property investing is like what you're talking about, Jeff, is you can't do it. It's not a solo sport. You can't do this alone. You need experts, and they're going to accelerate things a lot faster, but they need to know their stuff. Like I've had advice from people that just contradicts completely to, like, I've spoken to lawyers, like I was in legal technology. I spoke to a lawyer about one situation, then spoke to another lawyer about another situation, complete opposite opinions. And if I followed one advice, I'd be, hundreds of thousands of dollars worse off if I followed the first guy's opinion. So like, make sure you're getting good people, I guess, in your corner. Are there what have you? Okay, are there any horror stories that you've seen out there? Like, I think that one that you talked about before with the PPOR. Like, are there any other horror stories that we should be aware of from a trust side of things or a property investor side of things that you've seen?
I think the stamp duty trap. So a lot of the times, what happens is, so 2 horror stories, actually 2 forms of horror stories that I've come across. One are like they end up, people don't realize the people can sometimes focus on the cost of trust at times, and versus not the ability to leverage and ability to be able to multiply, right? But then, like, there's a limit to that. You can't leverage to the hill. You can't just like leverage for the rest of your, like, to the nth degree. You have to do it in a specific, like, you have to do it in a controlled manner. So I think people, like, either like when the pendulum swings, like they either swing like too far on the right or too far on the left, and they're not, like, I think meeting in the middle would be like fantastic. And then another one is where they sort of like have bought their last property that they could service in their personal name, and then they want to like move it to a trust, and then that gets them stuck.
Yeah. And maybe Jeff, this is probably a bit too broad of a question, but typically when do people start thinking about trusts? Or maybe Alesha, actually, you could probably answer that. When do you see in people's typical portfolios, it's can generalize, but is it property number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? Like, when do you start to see people like having to seriously think about trusts?
I think it usually stems from the fact that they are now wanting to grow a bigger portfolio. So for someone, it could be after 2 properties. For someone, it could be after 5 properties, depending on how long they've been in the market. So I think it's more of a desire. And usually, like, once the person's done a bit of research and they've gone, okay, like, this is what I'm after. What do you think about this, Alesha? As an accountant, that's when I can give them the best advice for their scenario, rather than like them coming in sort of like not knowing much. So that's or like wanting to, like, it's almost like a partnership, right? Like a person comes with the questions and things like that. But I don't know if I've really answered your question. The answer is it depends on the mindset of the person, and that's probably the right way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I see out there is, like, again, just chat to an accountant, just chat to someone, chat to a broker, chat to an accountant. Because I was chatting with an investor a a week or two ago, and they're like, yeah, so we're going to max out our borrowing capacity and serviceability. We're going to buy this next one. It's going to be in our personal name, and then we're completely tapped out. Then we're going to go set it up in a trust. And I was like, oh, cool. Did you like that advice? Sounds counterintuitive to what I know and seen every other smart property investment going. Like, what do you? Oh, no. I just watched the TikTok and the YouTubes, and they're like, yeah, you max out your borrowing. And it's like, no, just, speak to your professional, because you might be making a mistake going down that path. So what does that mean? Oh, it means that you've bought that property for $600,000. You've paid $30,000 worth of stamp duty. You're now fully tapped out of your borrowing capacity, and you can't go for the next one. So then this is that double double stamp duty, because they're like, to continue, you need to sell one of your assets or transfer that into a trust to get it cash flow positive. And then you need to sell the property, essentially transfer the ownership to a brand new entity, which is your trust. And then you have to pay stamp duty on that. And then, I don't know, is this true, Alesha? Capital gains tax on any profit. So if that was 10 years ago, you purchased that property, it was $500,000. You have to sell it to your new entity for $1 million. Then you pay your capital gains tax only to release equity. So this is where typically, like, if you're property number 1, 2, 3, chat to your accountant. Like, just get an accountant and chat to them and just find out, because you will get stuck and you will mess it up. And it's like, oh, that's all fun and games. It's not. It sucks, and it's really annoying, and it's very expensive if you mess it up. Sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
I think tax planning. Sorry.
There you go.
You're going to give us the 5
Sorry,
pennies.
I was just going to say, poor tax planning is probably one of the items that I see where people don't think about planning in advance, or even structuring things in a way that they can plan, even with CGT or something like a property that they have to sell. If it is in their personal name, they're like, oh, I bought it a few years ago, now my income is a lot more, and I've got a wife who's on maternity leave at the moment, for example, so we could sell it, but it's in 50-50 in our names. Whereas if it was in a discretionary trust, for example, one benefit would be to distribute that income to someone, your partner, who's a lower income in that year. So I think proper tax planning goes a long way, even with CGT. And a lot of the time, sometimes when I'm having these conversations, people say, oh, I don't really want to sell to move, but sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward, unfortunately, when you are stuck in a dead end situation.
Yeah. The interesting one that I wanted to get to Gurav's question. He's saying we have to mute Joe. No more questions from Joe, apparently. No, I'm not saying that. You can take that up with GM.
Yeah, hold on. I saw another comment from Sebastian that just said,
well, he just wanted to make you feel better, Joe.
Great input from Joe.
He just wanted to make you feel better.
Really getting mixed messages here, guys.
Go on.
What's
Gurav?
But
so I think it's so this is in 2 parts, because it was too much text on one thing, which tells me the question's too long. So Gurav, make your question shorter and we'll get to them. Is the trust relevant for partners with similar marginal tax rate and no adult kids to be able to distribute income? More particularly if they're carrying deductible debt, which is set to be debt recycled. This sounds like you need to sit down with somebody, Gurav, by the way, and therefore can be converted over to deductible debt if investing in personal names. Does that question make sense, Alesha?
I think the last bit he lost me at the last bit.
Yeah. So let's just say this.
So they're saying that two professionals have the same wage. They both earn 100K. There's no kids. So are they able to just?
No, it's saying is it relevant? So is it useful? Is my thing. And the answer to that is, well, what are you trying to achieve, Gurav? That's what are you? Yeah, I don't know. Oh no, it's not a shit answer, Joe. Because
do you want to save tax, or do you want to purchase property? I think that's the question, right? For everyone, the answer is going to be different.
Yeah,
so true. Same
because Joe, let's just say if somebody said, because that's where you start getting into the realm of advice, because then it's like, well, because then you have to really consider somebody's specific circumstances and say, well, okay, now that we know more about, and I know Gurav a little bit, so I can kind of say, well, look, mate, I think he's on the fence about whether he buys more properties or not. So yeah, but go and speak to your accountant, Gurav, please. We're not. He's trying to get a cheapie in from not cheapy, but like some
freebie.
free advice. No,
Free
you know what the
advice.
most expensive advice is? It's free advice. Okay. Can we answer?
good.
Yeah. I mean, depends on who you ask for this one. So the question is,
Should I do
one of
Yeah,
these
okay.
sheep? I'm asking this question, Joe, so I can throw to you because Joe's going to have a question I completely disagree with, but that's okay. Joe and I don't always have to agree. So should I do one of these sheep online trust companies or an accountant? They are so much cheaper. Joe, what are your thoughts? Remember, we've got an accountant on the stream as well.
Yeah, we do have an accountant. I think professional advice pays for itself 2 times over. Previously, I have used these cheap online trust companies and got a trust created. And it's just high level. There's a lot of high level nonsense in there that doesn't really go deep enough. And then I had to give it to my accountant and then pay my accountant to fix my online trust, which is why Jeff is making fun of me, because you know what, why would I pay $2.5-3 grand when I can pay 1,900 plus whatever the state stamp duty is? What are your thoughts on this? Do you see, are you fixing these things all the time, Alesha, like these online platforms, or are they worthwhile, and do you do them?
I think a lot of people get themselves into a mess where they don't understand like terminologies of a trust, which is where we sit down and we have a chat with our clients before we set them up in a trust. And what is the saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. So if you haven't set up a trust before, most likely you wouldn't know what kind of beneficiary you want in that trust, or what kind
It wasn't even
like who
it
you
wasn't
want
even
to-
that. So with our particular instance, it was that the trust company didn't tick a box that was relevant for ours and didn't ask the question if it was relevant for our situation. So like it didn't work for property investors. So it worked for, you know, other investors, and I don't know what it did. There was a button there, and then I'm like, he's like, where's this box about X of blah blah blah? I don't know, and it's not there. They've got the lawyer to go through it, and the lawyer's like, there's nothing about this situation that then fundamentally affects this property purchase. So no, you need to add that clause in, which requires a lawyer to go into that agreement and read all of the 170 pages and then insert the clause. So it wasn't the high level macro was fine, the beneficiaries. So yeah, I think it's just, again, understanding your situation. Like that, those online platforms might be great for share investors, but maybe not for property investors, or it might be good for crypto, or it might be good for whatever, but it's not really still your individual.
I don't trust myself, Joe. I just don't trust that I understand enough. So yeah, because
So
what
you're
happens
gonna purchase, yeah,
Sorry.
I 100% agree with you. Sorry, Jeff, to cut you, but like you're gonna purchase a like $500,000 or $1 million asset or $600,000 asset. Sorry, whatever amount of asset, not you specifically, but an investor is gonna purchase a massive asset and then is worried about paying a little bit for the right advice. Just like have a think about the thought process behind that, because I think sometimes, like when you save pennies, you end up spending pounds, and you may miss out on stuff which is worth like including in the first go. Or like sometimes trusts come into being, people go purchase property, but like the corporate trustee doesn't have all the things that need to be registered. Like they don't have a registered tax file number, the trust doesn't have a tax file number, the company doesn't have an ACN. So then the property is purchased, but then it's technically in limbo land because the trust isn't fully functional. So like there are lots of different elements when you go to a professional that need to be done before you purchase property.
Yeah,
or
not even all professionals are created equal. So I don't disagree with Joe's ChatGPT approach to get the bare bones and understanding. So make sure that you're on the same page with whoever it is. Joe, should we throw to our final sponsor, because we'll have to wrap it up because we'll have to and then we'll come back and.
I'm going through these list of questions and some absolute bangers. So let's cover
so many
off.
though, Joe. Like it's been hard. That's
Everywhere you look, someone else is making money in property except for you. Your mate, he just bought a house. It's already gone up $100,000. There's some bloke on Facebook, he's bragging about pulling in a 7% rental yield. Meanwhile, you're stuck scrolling real estate and domain, confused as hell and having no idea about where to start. Or maybe you're that mate that's got $100,000 in equity. You have a few properties under your belt, but you feel stuck. You're unsure about how to scale without over-leveraging and not knowing what the next right move is. So why does it feel like everyone else has some kind of secret that you're missing out on? It's because they do. There's a reason some people keep stacking properties while others sit on the sidelines stacking excuses. There's a reason why some investors buy under market value while others pay too much. There's a reason why investors know the hot spots before there's any heat. And there's a reason that some people build $150,000 in passive income while others just spend years thinking about it. And it comes down to knowledge. And that's exactly why Jeff Miles and I, Joe Tucker, created the Level Up Property course to hand you the exact step-by-step process that we've used to buy over $100 million worth of property in today's market. We've built Australia's largest property investment community with over 80,000 members, and we help everyday investors secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, all without wasting years of their life trying to figure it out the hard way. Making an uneducated decision on the biggest purchase in your life is just gambling with your future.
Stop it. Get some help.
And this isn't just another how to buy property course. Let's be clear though, this course isn't free. What? And neither should it be. This is our life's work. We've spent over 100 hours each on this course alone. Oh, babe. Okay, video number 3. Number 4 with million does... Fuck. Done. We've got decades of experience, millions of dollars in deals distilled into a repeatable process that you can take away for yourself. If you're looking for free advice, there's plenty of noise out there. You can go and find that if you'd like. But if you want real, actionable, step-by-step guided process that works in today's market, then this investment is going to change everything for you. By the time that you finish this course, you will have full confidence. You'll have every tool that you need to build an amazing portfolio if you act on it, right? Which is why we have mentoring built in. So we kick you up the butt to make sure that you're kicking your goals. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to watch everyone else making money in property before you jump in and start playing the property game properly? Because the sooner you start, the sooner you start winning.
Just long enough, Joe, I think.
Beautiful.
Hey,
Alesha.
so, Joe, how are you feeling about property for the next 3 months? 1 October's coming.
1st of October is coming. Well, that's a good question, Jeff. How are you feeling about property in the next 3 months? We have the first home buyers grant that is now making a 5% deposit possible. So on a $600,000 property, instead of needing $120,000, you only need $30,000. So it's going to be super duper interesting. These incentives have been around, but really all they do is just add to the demand. They add to the cost base. It's going to open up the market for people who couldn't get in the lower end. I guess the negative side is going to be higher interest rates. Really, like people that can't afford to save up $120,000 are really, probably not the type of people that, are going to be able to afford 190% LVR, $600,000 property, right? That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on all of this, Alesha? From an accounting side of things, like how does this first home buyers grant affect you or your views on property?
I think it's basics, like economics principles, right? Supply and demand. So it sounds like the supply is going to remain pretty stagnant or grow slowly. And then the demand is going to be a lot more from first home buyers. So it helps people who want to get into the property market. But I hope that people don't make the wrong decisions just to be able to purchase the property. They get the right asset. I
was
think
hard.
very important.
It's hard with the FOMO as well, right? Like I've literally told my brother as soon as the announcement came out, I'm like, you got to get on this. And I called him today and I'm like, where are you at? Have you done your broking? Have you got this thing done? He's like, yep, done it all. I'm like, good boy. That's it. You're going to be okay. Because after, it's great for the people that are first 3 months in, 6 months in, 12 months in, but then as it starts to roll like that is going to increase the value, and it just makes it harder for the other people. So incredibly amazing for the people for the first 3, 6, 12 months. And then it just makes life so much harder for everybody else and the first home buyers going forward. It's very much a demand-led thing, which is so unfortunate, because I don't know, we sit in a property echo chamber and I hear so many loud noises about this, but then the same policy just keeps coming out again and again and again. But in saying that, I don't want to be a negative Nancy upon it all. One of the things that's coming out for Victoria, which I actually think is pretty smart, I might just share my screen because I was just looking at this just before we jumped on. Faster home approvals for two homes on lots in first subdivision.
It's all noise, Joe. It's all noise. Greg said it was good, and I said, "Oh yeah, okay." What about VCAT?
Greg said it was well. If Greg said it was good, Greg said it's good.
And then he came back to me several days later and said, "Yeah, nah, forget about that." That's
well, it's just. I mean, the problem is they're affecting infill locations, right? Like this is subdivision of land, like infill, which is there's not enough supply to actually even make it worthwhile, right? Like it's not enough. The problem is if they incentivize developers like they should, it's very unattractive to make building properties and developers to be giving them money. It's unappealing and it doesn't look good. The optics are bad, but it's not going to solve the problem. But sorry. Anyway, we've got some great trust questions. We've got some great trust questions. So let's hit them up.
Okay, Joe, you pick a couple. I've got a few here. While we're this is going to be somewhat rapid.
Can you inject cash into a trust at the end of the financial year to allow it to become self-sufficient for the following financial year? And is this enough to qualify for the elusive accountant letter?
Can I just say before you answer this question, Alesha, and you'll have an amazing answer. I don't know if I like that last bit of the question. And is this enough to qualify for the elusive accountant letter? I mean, maybe it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but I don't know if that's the right mindset to go about it, because it's about planning rather than qualifying for the elusive. It's like, yeah. Anyway, please answer the question. Sorry, Alesha.
I think I agree. I think the elusive accountant's letter, I was also focused on that. I think it is a simple answer, and if you can answer it for yourself, you should be able to get an accountant's letter. And it is very simple. Can the trust pay for itself for a sustainable period of time? Right? And there's no little there's no elusivity about it, I think. So yeah, that's what I think. If you genuinely believe that the trust has got enough money, that either the property is positively geared or you've put in extra cash that you're not going to touch in it, then you can. But just putting it in for the financial year end, for the statements, that's a big no-no.
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter about the timing of it to try and squeeze it in there. It doesn't really matter. It's about, is it self-sustaining? I tell you what, I know we've, poo-pooed a little bit of trust, as we should, to give the reality of what the situation is. But once these suckers really get cash flow positive and actually become a useful vehicle, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that the banks will not look at it actually is a really cool vehicle that may have some potential for property investors, but you just stop trying to be dodgy dingoes and it'll eventually get there. Like, we bought a property for $500,000. 3 years later, the property rent was $500. It's now $720. The interest rate that we purchased the property at was 8%. It's now 5.8%. And these little incremental shifts in raising of the rent, dropping of the interest rates will eventually get that sucker positive. All we need to do is put another, $80,000 of cash into it, and that's done. That's fully cash flow positive, off the books. Forget about it. On to the next one. But I know we're not here for the positivity of trust. Let's
the reality
of trust. Sorry.
Yeah. I suppose for me, the more, because you saw the major lenders like your St. George, sorry, not St. George, like Westpac, CBA, ANZ, and the other guy, NAB. I did work for them, so I should know. But you see, they stepped out of SMS lending a couple of years ago because too many people were just jumping in and doing that. I suspect, Joe, just because, so if you start to see too many people on TikTok, and it's getting quite noisy. It is really, you see that, you might just see lenders start to say, well, okay, we're pulling back from this policy. We don't like this policy. It's kind of it's like when too many investors jump into the market. You saw at APRA. APRA limited the bank's books to 30% of investors. They sort of said, oh, you're getting up to 40, 45. So they pulled it back. So they sort of made it less incentivized for investors. So, Joe, it's that's the one thing that it's death taxes and changes the lending policy. So I wouldn't sort of count your chickens too much. But anyway, enough from me. Alesha, if you've got a couple, here we go. This is I think this is more of a lending. Go. Yeah.
We'll bring that one.
No, because it's not about. I mean, Alesha. I think Alesha's she knows to stay. So, is self-sustainability assessed collectively across all trusts or individually?
Great question. Very good question.
For you, Alesha, by the way.
I think that's a lending question, though, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, well, I mean, at least from a bank's perspective, definitely across each trust. So each trust, and that's where the accountant comes in to
separate. Because legal entity, right? When you create the company, that creates a separate legal entity. So it'll be Joe here, and then it'll be company 1 with the trust, company 2 with the trust, company 3 with the trust. And, these 3 aren't connected to it. Well, they're connected by proxy of distribution. Anyway.
Overcomplicating it probably a little bit, Joe. Yeah. But anyway, this is I want to ask you on this one from a tax perspective, Alesha, and you can throw depends. Can you guys please answer thoughts on purchasing initial investment property under a trust? And I'll already throw the thing out there that does depend. But what are your kind of pros and cons of individual versus personal? We've talked about it a little bit, but it'd be good to crystallize what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I think you definitely can't get the negative gearing benefit in your first initial property. And that's when you need to run the numbers and you need to work out if, for example, losing that negative gearing benefit, is that going to make you run faster or is that going to make you run slower in a trust? And then also another thing you want to think about is your land tax in a trust versus your personal name, especially for your initial property, and run the numbers thinking about those things, which is why also thinking about like rental yield, potential capital growth. So all of those elements should help you make that decision as to whether you should buy in in your name initially or not. Actually, one thing I forgot was lending. So for example, you also want to work out with your mortgage broker if you can, if you purchase this first property in your personal name, will you be able to move forward again?
Yeah. What's your answer to that question, Jeff, from a broking perspective?
My answer is, how quickly do you want to run? Because if somebody says, like I speak to people and their goals are 300K in 10 years. And I'm like, okay, well, in that situation, we can map it out. And that's great. You want to do that. Here's what you need to make that call. What's most important to you? I'm not telling you need to go into that structure. Speak to your accountant about the negatives. You might need to reassess that goal. Speak to another person who says, oh, I only want 50K in 20 to 30 years. I'm like, okay, well, in that situation, you buying in a trust, you need to go to your accountant, but that may be detrimental to your circumstances. But go and run the numbers and understand that. But yeah, the longer term time frames dictates what the lending should be, Joe. So that's where the initial. I strip it back to, well, what do you want, and that'll dictate where your answer wants to go.
Well, I want the most amount of money in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of risk and least amount of frustration. So I want to make that most amount of money.
Trusts are very frustrating, Joe. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly.
When somebody says trust you automatically, But no.
Yeah, but I guess, who cares about the paperwork? But
well, you said least frustration, so your goal is least frustration.
Typically, people, I just don't want to tell first-time investors that they should go out there and purchase in a trust for their first property. Typically what you see is people getting in their personal names first, and then because, as I said, 1, 2, and 3, and then they start to tap out, and it's that kind of final piece that becomes that piece of the puzzle. So you've still got 1 and 2, which are in your personal name, which allows you that tax deductibility, which allows you not having to pay for trust and allows you to do having some flexibility. So as soon as you start getting into trust, you can't take the genie back out of it. Well, yeah, I guess you can buy, you can then continue to buy in your personal name, maybe. Yeah, but typically from every single success, most people I meet, they do not get the first property in their trust. So don't feel scared if you're a brand new property investor and thinking, holy shit, I got to think about this stuff. Speak to an accountant, but yeah, just, you don't need to. Trust isn't the solve all. I don't want some poor kid going out there being like, oh my gosh, I need to think about trust. You got enough to think about. You got to save for the deposit. Like, just take things one step at a time. You'll get into trust.
I think if they've watched the entire session, I would imagine that they're picking up the vibe that we're not saying that necessarily that first one should be, then it comes in. Yeah. So what I wanted to say, you pick out some questions, Joe.
There's 2 on my list, so pick one of them.
Go.
I'll have the other one. I'll have the bottom one.
Okay. Because I don't know. That's a.
If you've got a couple of. Okay. Just remove my question. If you've got a couple of properties in a corporate trustee set up myself and the other directors are capped in terms of lending, what are my options? Is this more of a broker question, Jeff? It is.
Well, your options are you either need to increase your income, the boring old answer, or wait. Those increase your income, which in turn will increase your ability to have deposits available, or decrease the debt. I mean, it's a simple kind of, it's not, which then can be sort of attained by potentially selling, go and speak to your accountant, or you pay down some of that debt. So those are the ways that before doing either of these options, always go and map it out, because the last thing I always say to people, go and chat to me first, and we'll run those things, and then go and speak to your accountant to understand what you're up for in terms of if you sell an investment property or if you do X, Y, and Z. What does that mean? How much is that going to cost you? And is that worth it for you? If it's not worth it for you, then maybe don't do it. Maybe the best answer is what are your options? Doing nothing, maybe. It's also boring.
I've got another question on top of you, because on top of this for you, Jeff. So I've got a couple of properties under corporate trustee, myself and others. The directors are capped. So when you buy in your personal name, typically you buy in a personal name with somebody else. So Joe and his brother can't afford to get a deposit. So when I go get a $500,000 loan together, we can afford to go buy a property. But then we're both liable for the debt 100%, because my brother could just walk away and the banks want that ability to be able to do it. So going in with a partner doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to do it better. But is that the same with a trust? If you go buy a trust and put a property into it, is the debt still considered split 50-50 between the beneficiaries, and it counts like that?
My understanding is yes. I haven't had too many brothers and that buy in trusts. It's mostly sort of husband and wife or couples buying in the trust. So I haven't had too many people come to me who've bought. I suppose the exception is unit trusts and all that. So I think it would be case by case to assess the scenario. But for me, and with most lenders these days, provided you can present a case, you can have them exclude this common debt reducer. So you can have them exclude that anyway. It just, where it gets complicated, Joe, is when you want to get equity out of that. Then you need both people to agree to extract that equity. That's the most complicated part these days. Not all lenders, I'd say probably, 20-30% will do the common debt reducer approach. So the non-majors, they'll probably sort of question why you're buying with other not question, but they'll sort of say, okay, does this make sense to do this trust in this family thing? They'll just ask a few more questions because they're non-major lenders. They'll still do it, but So that's my thought, Joe. Does that make sense?
No, it's good. Solid.
So yeah, effectively, it becomes a bigger challenge.
I'm just trying to poke some holes into this, because if you do have multiple parties and you could then, not be liable for the amount of debt, that would be fantastic. But it's not the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. I think we should. Poor Alesha's done incredibly well, held it together. You're bloody sick, and yeah, thank you very much for today. Okay, so last question is one thing that I think is cool and very little spoken about when using a trust is the ability to set up a bucket company. Oh, the big question. Maybe just share your views on it. So how should we think about bucket companies, Alesha?
That's a great question. I love that. I think bucket companies are fantastic vehicles to use again to save on tax. They work really well in scenarios where you've got a bit of business and things like that, right? Because it's day-to-day income when you are running a business. It's income, it's profit. When you're talking about a property purchase, you are talking perhaps very minimal rental income or very minimal positively geared stuff on a day-to-day basis, and you'll have a bigger CGT consequence. So when you sell a property, you have to pay capital gains tax. Now, when you are holding a property in a trust and you sell that property, what happens is it goes down to the beneficiaries. All the profits go down to the beneficiaries. And the tax, therefore, then applies on the beneficiaries level. And in that scenario, humans, people, non-AI chatbots or robots and companies, or non-companies, so only humans get the capital gains discount, and bucket companies or companies don't. So it's a fantastic tool that, in my practice, I use a lot to save tax for our clients, but for day-to-day income, so usually like people who are maybe holding properties for less than a year, so they're not even going to apply CGT discount to it.
Oh yeah. So they're flippers.
Yeah, flippers, and so
Because that's
just
the
because
thing.
you
Kind of like what I was saying at the beginning, the trust can't hold any, money. It has to be distributed through the beneficiaries, which is why then you can then distribute that profit rather than paying. And then sometimes you can see people holding all of that money, all of that profit in the company, which is 25% tax instead of 45% tax, which then allows them to use. So, right, you make $1 million in profit or $500,000 worth of profit. You can then leverage and only pay 25% tax on that income to then have such a bigger chunk to then go into the next deal. Like, I think people don't understand that point. It's like, holy shit, you mean that I can, like, $1 million of profit paid at 45% gives you $55,000 of value. And then if you've got a company tax rate of, 25%, you've got $75,000, $750,000 worth of value that can go into the next deal. It gets very.
I feel like I need a diagram, Joe. When you start throwing numbers at me, I need to see it on a screen. That's what you would say.
You sound like Joe now.
No.
No, so for example, the CGT discount, sorry, just to backtrack a little bit. The CGT discount, what it means is if, for example, you bought a property for $500,000, you sold it for $1 million, right? You've made $500,000 on that property. And when you make that amount of money, if you hold it for more than a year and you distribute the benefits to a person, like you only have to pay tax on half of that amount, which means so your $500,000 becomes $250,000 when you get the CGT discount. But if you distribute it to a company, you don't get the CGT discount, so companies can't get it. But it works really well for businesses because businesses, you're running a day-to-day income. It's a different type of tax for businesses because it's an income minus expenses kind of tax, right? Versus a CGT asset holding tax. The two separate tax that you have to think about. And then with a business, you can definitely pour a bunch of money into the bucket company. Now, bucket company can work well for a property if you're not holding it for CGT. In most scenarios, like this is 97% of the scenarios, right? Like you would hold it for longer than a year and it would work really well.
I love that we gave gave you the ability to just nerd out there at the end to show
Sorry.
people that they have no idea about tax and all of these different structures. And like I think that was a perfect finisher because it's like, you have to think about so many different variables about your unique situation, which actually fits in perfectly for you, which is going to be completely different. Like, Jeff and I are doing this portfolio, that situation completely different and will not suit you at all, but it works perfectly for us. And then it's awesome. Alesha, you've absolutely crushed this. How do people get more Alesha in their life? How can people reach out to you? You're an amazing accountant. How do we chat?
Yeah, for sure. So feel free to reach out to me through my accounting firm, Tax App Accountants. You can Google us. And my website is taxapp.com.au. There's a contact form there. There is also a phone number. So like if you want to call, if you want to email, if you want to contact, use the contact form, whatever floats your boat.
I put the contact there. Yeah, you are you may be a bit busy the next couple of days, Alesha, but no, it was because there was a huge amount of people and really appreciate you coming on the show, and particularly even you weren't feeling 100% today, but also for those I want to get this message out there that the reality of trust. So drop us that 5-star if you share this with people. Get amongst the team and share the value that Alesha's got. Give us that 5-star, which helps us get. I can appreciate now why economists don't come on the show as well, because the questions we ask live, it's often, yeah. Could you just imagine sort of trying to think through the way that they want to answer that question? But you've done it fantastically. So, Alesha, appreciate you coming on, and people have left amazing feedback. Thank you, Alesha. It's been great to hear from you tonight. Thanks, Jeff and Joe. Thank you for your time tonight, Alesha. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
lots of hot tips.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much, Alesha. You killed it. Let's go buy a property, guys. See you later.